and welcome to the Fixing Football Podcast. I'm your host Martin Naylor, and this week I'm joined by Scott Naylor, Liam O'Meara, and we have special guest Steve, Everton fan, who's dropping in, and he's going to give us the insights on the big news this week of Everton's 10-point deduction for breaches with financial fair play. And we touch on the England match as well and the international week, but I don't want to keep you too long. I want to get straight into this. Thank you everyone who's been listening. Please continue to like and share and subscribe. It really does go a long way. We're slowly building, so thank you very much everyone who's done that so far. If you aren't subscribed and listening, please do so. It really makes a world of difference to us. You can catch all our information at www.fixingfootballpodcast.com, and like I say, I won't keep you too much longer. Let's get straight into the episode. Well boys, how are we?
Very well. How are you doing, Martin? You okay?
Yeah, I'm good, mate. Scott, how are you doing, pal?
Very, very well. Not bad at all.
Listen, we've had some big news this week. The news that's dominated, other than the super boring England match, which we'll touch on in a minute. But Everton have had 10 points deducted, and I think this has caught everyone by surprise. More so the fact that the Premier League haven't bottled it. Liam, what's your initial thoughts before we deep dive in it? Because I do want to touch on England for a sec while we're in the midst of an international break. But what's your initial thoughts on that 10-point deduction?
Yeah, well, we'll obviously dissect it a little bit more shortly, but I think people knew it was down the road. It's not a surprise in terms of the sanction. I think what people have been most surprised at is the severity of it. 10 points is a substantial deduction. And yeah, it makes, I imagine, a couple other teams that we can't name that may play in different shades of blue a little bit concerned about what might be sort of down the road for them. Scott, do you have anything to comment on one of those teams that's not one of the teams that you support?
Yeah, the team who may or may not be able to be named. I think there is. I think there's a tendency to just try and conflate the two, or the three as it is, but they're not really the same things, and it's like they're very different scenarios. I think there's been a lot of uproar in terms of when the news about Everton broke. You know, there was a lot of, oh, what about City? Why is City not getting the same treatment? Why is it taking so long? And it's, you look at the three cases, they're very extremely different ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, I agree. And we'll do a deep dive a little bit because I do want to know a bit more about Chelsea's current status with their
unnamed club in London.
We'll use the Pro Evo names. The London Blue,
West London Blue, yeah,
West London Blue, and Manchester Sky Blues or whatever they were called.
I think they were Man Blue.
Man Blue, and what were Everton?
Merseyside Blue.
Were they Merseyside?
They were so creative, weren't they, with these names?
But while we're here, it's currently international break. No one is really asked about this. I think we tried to fix it, but the FA weren't listening, that we wanted to group all these matches together. UEFA haven't clocked on yet. They mustn't be a subscriber just at this point, which is fair. But yeah, what did you make of the match, Liam?
It was dull. And I'm not one to try and normally get into the watching England play is dull debates, and I find it tedious at times, but that one was a dull game. However, England won comfortably. They were in control of the game. There was a few early scares with a couple of players that maybe don't play in England teams often enough. Maybe like Gallagher, for example, started a little bit sort of cold, if you will. But I think everyone sort of settled in and they won. They did what they have to do. And if you look at the game on Tuesday, that Italy have to come through against Ukraine to get through, I think England should focus on what's gone well in qualifying rather than what's gone bad.
Yeah, I really expected it to be a boring week of football. I didn't expect such a struggled performance where Southgate felt like he needed to bring on some more established first teamers like Declan Rice or Saka and totally change the setup of the team, end up taking Rashford off and move Foden around.
Can I jump in on this? I think what's causing England a lot of structural problems at the moment is the lack of an established left-back that is of international level because of the injuries to Shaw and Chilwell. I think that's causing England a lot of problems, particularly when they want to play Rashford. because essentially that whole left-hand side has no natural left footers.
Yeah.
And he's obviously played Tomori out there as a left back, which I don't think Tomori's ever played left back. You'd know better than me, Scott. And I think that's a real issue, particularly with Trippier now going home as of Sunday. So I think that's causing a lot of structural problems for England. So hopefully by the Euros, both Chilwell and Shaw are there. But it's frustrating that they've not gone for a natural left-sided defender, even if it means dropping down a little bit in quality when you're playing Malta.
Yeah. Scott, Southgate promised an entertaining match for the fans, and I don't want to get into ticket prices and getting people to London and stuff like that for whatever. But I mean, what did first of all, what did you make of the match? And do you think we should be either introducing a lot more new players in matches like this where we've already got qualification tied up, or do you think we should be putting our full strength team out and absolutely battering sides? Because it seems like the tactics were, I don't know, not really of substance, really. There wasn't any clear direction other than a few new faces here and there. It wasn't like a brand new defence or goalkeeper or, front line or anything like that. So, I mean, give us your thoughts.
So my take on it is, in those games, it's kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't. If you put your full strength team out and you batter Malta 10-0, it's just, of course you battered Malta. You had Harry Kane and co on the pitch and you mauled them. Of course you were going to, a bit like the France game against, who did France play?
Gibraltar.
Gibraltar won 14-0. It's like, look, okay, cool, but it's Gibraltar. So, and you had Mbappe on. So of course you did. So I don't think there's really any benefit. I would have preferred to see some players who don't usually get the chance to just have a run out and see and just see how they do. I don't know if there's any benefit in playing Harry Kane in that game. What's the point? You could have used a Watkins or somebody else to just have a run out, a couple of goals in an England shirt. You can't do any harm. You know what you're going to get from Harry Kane. You're not going to learn anything new by playing him in a game like this. So, but it is what it is. Again, to Liam's point, they won the game pretty comfortably. It wasn't, the most amazing performance in terms of, champagne football, but you're there to win games, whether it's 1-0 or 10-0. The reward for this is the same. So, you can't have too many complaints with a 2-0 win, but they're not the most enthralling contest. Again, so many of the same questions, and it's boring to keep going over them. So I don't really want to. It's hard to ignore the shoehorning of particular players into that squad and into that team that he just seems to just have an obsession with. And
I think Henderson's been the main one who's stood out this week.
Henderson, Rashford for me. Like, what is he doing? He's in terrible form, and there are several players who you could put in that spot that can do the same job as him better. I just don't understand. He's got a particular obsession with probably three players: Rashford, Maguire, Henderson. They have to be in his squad, and I don't really see why, because none of them bring anything that we can't get from somebody else to a high standard. So, didn't really learn too much, and my interest in the game was very minimal, admittedly, because it was England against Malta, and we're already qualified, so who cares? But disappointing to see a lot of the same stuff, and I think it's why we're never going to win anything with them.
So we've got Macedonia Monday evening, and then we are a couple of weeks away from the Euros draw. So hopefully we'll be able to get some FFP dates booked in where we can do some live events. What do you think, Liam?
And worth pointing out with the draw now that England have guaranteed their status as top seeds. That was a big thing for them. Although, in most of the groups, 3 will qualify anyway, so I don't know why they were absolutely obsessed with it. But that was a target that they had, so that's good. A few questions, isn't there? Still, will Wales be in there? They had a big draw away at Armenia. So they're now in a bad position to qualify through the group, I understand it, and now it's likely to be playoffs if they...
Well, Wales have took 4 points off Croatia in qualifying and none off Armenia, or 1 off Armenia, I think.
Yeah.
Like, it should be the other way around, really, when you're divvying this up at the beginning of the qualifying process. But
I think it shows up with Wales, without Ramsey and Bale, because obviously Ramsey wasn't playing in this game. they're just a bang average side, and they always were. And I think they've just all that's happened is they've slowly returned to the mean, and they'll go back to not qualifying for tournaments, I suspect.
Yeah, when you can't fall back on any world.
Unless we host them, then they'll get to join in. But I think it'll be another 50 odd years before they qualify for another one.
They were riding the wave of a bit of riding the crest of a bit of talent that had all come through at a similar time. And then you put, arguably Aaron Ramsey's in world class form when Wales started to pick it up, and obviously Gareth Bale as well. Neither of them are there. I think Ramsey's injured, but neither of them are there now, so who knows? Listen, let's get straight on to Everton. So, and I want to dive into it a little bit, Liam, so you can clear a few things up for me. They've been deducted 10 points, effective immediately. There is going to be an appeal that the club have said. Why have they been deducted 10 points?
Okay, so this comes down to essentially how they reported losses during the COVID season, because the Premier League clubs were given a bit of leeway in that year with regards to losses that they could attribute to COVID, understandably, with regarding FFP and the Premier League rules regarding FFP. What it seems became clear to some, and obviously Everton are appealing this, so everything is up for interpretation at the moment, that the losses that they were reporting were quite in excess of other clubs. And as I understand it, some of the other clubs did essentially a deep dive on this and were concerned about what Everton reported. And these clubs were clubs such as Burnley in that year that did it. And essentially an investigation has been going on since that point. And we're at
Burnley, Leicester and Leeds are the ones who are headlining this sort of claim against them.
Yeah, I wonder if other clubs maybe lodged it.
I think there is more clubs, but they're the
Southampton are in there as well.
Yeah,
Southampton are in there.
Yeah, so you're in a situation now where the investigation's concluded, and this independent panel, so it's not the Premier League, they refer all this to an independent panel, has deemed it fair to give them a 10-point deduction at the end of the investigation. Now, obviously for a lot of people that's difficult, because obviously it affects them now rather than when they allegedly committed the offences. But that's just how investigations work, and unfortunately there's no perfect solution to that, because you're innocent until proven guilty, so you can't just deduct points because you suspect things, and these things do take time, a la other unnamed clubs. So, yeah, that's sort of where we are today. So the understanding is Everton are going to lodge an appeal. I'm not sure they have done yet. I understand they are going to lodge an appeal. And as it stands today, they're now in the relegation zone, and with a 10-point deduction.
Scott, this has been a bit of a question, should they bother with the appeal given the quality of the Premier League's, bottom four, say, this season? Do you think it should be a case of just biting the bullet and think we can get out of this anyway, let's leave it where it is and take it?
Yeah. I think there's no harm in trying to appeal it, I guess, because then if you do happen to win and get those 10 points back, then happy days. And I don't know if there's a more severe punishment if they fail their appeal. I don't know if there's consequences for that in terms of extra fines or what have you, but they must deem it worth the risk either way. Because ironically, if they win their next game and Burnley, Sheffield United and Luton fail to win, they'll be out of the relegation zone already anyway, just with one win. So
they're in decent form.
Yeah, they are in decent form. Dyche's got on playing well. He's sort of getting all over our predictions a few weeks back in terms of first managers to go.
Just before you carry on that, Scott, do you think that this news will affect the players in any way? Given, obviously, they're in good form, they were playing well. Do you think this might knock them out of stride a little bit?
I actually think it'll probably could have the opposite effect. For example, if this happened to a Mourinho team, it would be the siege walls would go up, the world hates us, and I actually think it would galvanise the team if you've got the right motivator in place to do that. So I actually think it could go the opposite way. You think, you know what? Fine. If you want to put that against us, cool. Fans are on our side, because I think their next game is going to be, I think it's United at Goodison Park, and that's going to be proper. The fans are going to be so up for that. So I think it'll actually go the other way, and it could actually galvanise the team.
Liam, let's live in a world where there is no appeal, the alleged tag is out the window, is a 10-point deduction just justified for this offence?
Yes. And I've seen a lot of talk about the fact that a lot of signings that Everton have made over the last sort of 2 or 3 years have generally failed. That's not the point at all. A lot of this spending was designed to keep them up. They made big loan signings, paying quite hefty loan fees to some players. And yeah, absolutely. Like the financial irregularities, especially at the bottom of the table when you're competing against teams that are living in. We've given a lot of we've criticised a lot of clubs on this podcast, like Luton's and Sheffield United's, about this idea of no risk and living with the means. But how can we expect anything else if other teams just essentially throw money at it? They've not got a chance anyway. So absolutely, the rules are in there in place, and even if they don't agree with the rules, I know some clubs have levied the idea that financial fair play is unfair and it keeps teams in a natural pecking order. But you sign up to the rules. You can't just decide which rules are fair. Like, that's not how society works. So, yeah, I do think it's fair.
It's 30 million a year, basically, can you lose as a club as a whole. And I think some of the irregularities, if I'm not mistaken, are to do with the stadium build and the way that was financed alongside some debts that occurred with players. So, I don't know if you remember a few years back, and I don't know if it was under Ancelotti, when Everton spent big. You got players like James Rodriguez and Decore all came in for and I think they were quite inflated fees. Then that was right before or right after. I'm not 100%. I think it was right before the whole COVID season, if you will, or during that COVID season. Obviously, the stadium preparation was well underway. So, well, with that, I think Everton's argument was, and we'll get some clarity a little bit later on, that 105 million over 3 years. There's nothing to stop you losing 105 million in the first year and then trying to run a profit for the rest of that time. Clearly, that's not been the case. So we'll get some clarity a little bit later on. Should Scott, Manchester Blue and London Blue be worried about the precedent that the Premier League have set with this?
Certainly, yeah, to a degree. Well, I think all clubs, really. I think it's a warning not just to clubs who are a little bit in the limelight at the moment. I think it's a warning shot to any team. Because although certain clubs are in the firing line at the moment, I'm sure most Premier League clubs have probably diced very closely with this because the stakes are so high and the fees are so inflated. I'm sure the 3 clubs in question aren't the only ones who have been playing it close to the nail. So I think it's a warning shot for all teams in the Premier League that if you don't come correct with your figures, you're going to suffer the consequences. So I think everyone should be nervous about it.
Yeah, it's worth pointing out as well that in the EFL, there's been quite a number of these types of points deductions. This has happened quite a bit, particularly in the Championship, which is obviously the most difficult league to maintain yourself financially. Very, some of those clubs that operate at quite substantial losses. So it has happened. The ones that spring to mind are Derby and Birmingham City. Apologies if I've got any wrong there. I think I might be wrong about Sheffield Wednesday. Might have come a cropper on something like this before.
Sunderland as well. That rings a bell to me. I feel like
Maybe.
Sunderland had something.
Obviously, if we've got anything wrong there, we obviously sorry to the legal representatives of those clubs. But absolutely, it should be taken. These things should be taken very seriously. If I was Man City, unnamed Premier League Club 1 and unnamed Premier League Club 2, I'd probably be concerned to see the robustness of this punishment.
So, Scott, can you just clear up some of West London Blues, their current strife with FFP? I know earlier in the season, Todd Bowley and his team actually paid or almost prepaid a fine due to some FFP irregularities that they had found. Whilst going through books of the Abramovich era, obviously there was a lot of drama behind that sale, and I'm sure it went through very quickly, and not every stone was turned over during that process. So, can you just set us up where you are at the moment with that?
To where we are. Yeah, of course. So we self-reported some irregularities in our. I think the official term was incomplete financial reports or something like that. That was like the official terminology they used.
And this is
And
all under Abramovich in it as well.
Yeah, this stemmed from the due diligence that took place during the sale to the Clear Lake Group. They found these irregularities, and they effectively reported that in. I don't know how quickly, and obviously we only found out. It depends where we found out, but I'm sure during that process they said, "Look, we found this," and the owners interestingly ring fenced about 100 million quid to specifically for dealing with potential ramifications of an investigation into the finances. So they were expecting they at least put aside a hefty amount in the case of some fines. That was all sorted, so that was paid. Something that was interesting is that UEFA. This was to do with UEFA. That I think we paid 10 million euros to UEFA as a fine for this, and UEFA has a statute of limitations on how far back they could go to look, whereas the Premier League has no such rule, and they can go back as far as they please. So if they want to do any investigating, so the actual issue that we did have has been resolved and paid for. The problem that we have now is there is some new information that's come to light in terms of some suspect payments made by either Abramovich directly or through the club or whatever he's done, which have seemed to, on the surface, have benefited us. I think some of it involves payments made for Muletto transfer and William transfer to Anzi when they were there. It's got Dodge written all over it from day one anyway. But I think the important thing for Chelsea is there's no actual charge levied against them. There is somewhat of a looking into going into these payments, but there's no charge, no actual allegation, and no ongoing case as it stands at the moment, which I think is how it differs massively from clubs A and B.
Liam, Manchester Blue, is there grounds for them to be worried really now?
I mean, obviously, that's still an ongoing investigation, and it's very difficult to comment on the alleged 115 charges.
Well, we don't even know what they're relating to really as well. We have an outline.
That is there. It relates to around the same 6 or 7 offences about how money was moved around over quite a number of years, and that's where this 115 comes from. So some of them are repeat offences over a number of years. I think it's very difficult to comment on that until we know where we stand with them, really, with regard to the Man City one, because.
All right, let's live in a world where they are guilty as charged, and Everton have been deducted 10 points for a series of irregularities in theirs. What is the suitable punishment, hypothetically?
Well, anything's on the table, isn't it?
This is if you, Mr. Chairman, Dr. Liam O'Meara, Chairman of the FA. What's the punishment? What's the verdict? We're fixing football here.
I wouldn't expel them from the league, but I would look at potentially similar to what Saracens got in rugby union, where they got a very, very substantial points deduction. Because I don't think you can expel them from the league. I think because where does that end? Where do they go? What division do they go in? You're then making decisions for the rest of the football period, and that's not for the Premier League to do. But a very, very substantial points deduction, which then may lead to issues with regard to league status, is probably where I would...
30 points isn't going to touch them in terms of... It might stop them winning a league, but that's probably about it.
It's very hard to say about knowing what they're guilty of.
No, yeah. I'm saying they're guilty of everything. No, you're right. That's true.
A million points.
A million points. That would do it. So what we're going to do now is we're going to get the live views of a real life, in the flesh Everton fan. This is the first Fixing Football. We've got a guest on the show.
And it's of all fans to be, it's an Everton fan that we've got.
Best fan. I know. It's groundbreaking. Everton are well-established side, so it's only fair. So let's get him in, and then we're going to have some more questions about Everton. Right, so welcome, Steve. Thanks for joining us, mate.
Hello there. Yeah, thanks for having me on.
So Liam recommended your expertise in this subject, specifically on Everton. So first of all, tell us what the sort of general consensus is around the fans at the moment, given the news that came out. Was it Thursday, Friday?
Yeah, it was Friday lunchtime.
Yeah.
So that wasn't great timing. Like, kind of ruined the Friday feeling a little bit, But, yeah, to be fair, most of what I've seen looking around is kind of anger, but I haven't actually spoken to that many fans this weekend. Everyone's had a bit of a quiet one because it's international break, Don't know about you, but like, I don't know, all the tips get busy when it's international break because people actually have to start doing productive things,
Trafford centres around.
Yeah, all that kind of stuff, So, there's generally a bit of anger around it, because, there's that feeling that it's quite harsh, compared to other punishments, I only saw a thing today saying about how Leicester paid like between 3 or 4 million for a similar amount of going off on FFP, but that was as part of the Football League. So there's a kind of, so there's kind of, different things, but there's a general feeling that it's, it's this harsh because they're trying to make an example for why they don't need an independent regulator, or they don't need that harshly looked at by a independent regulator, and keep it in their own hands as much as they can.
So Scott here is an Everton, a Chelsea fan, and we were just talking about if you think Manchester City and Chelsea should be worried given the precedent that the Premier League have now set. I mean, what do you think about sort of their ongoing situation, and if you think that is something that they need to be worried about as well?
An odd one, because it feels like that's so far away from happening as well, because they've got about, what is it? It's like 115 charges, is it? City have got, or
Alleged.
something like that. Yeah. So, and then Chelsea have just kind of admitted to some wrongdoings, so it looks like there will be some charges. I think there's some other clubs that are rumoured to be somewhere around that situation as well. But it seems to be like having a lot more charges is their reasoning for it going on a lot longer. I'm not sure what's going to happen to them, to be honest, because one of the things where I heard the reasoning for us being the 10 points is that it's 6 points for the breach and then 1 point for every 5 million after. But then there was a kind of implication that stops at 12. But surely they can't go down that route of, well, maybe if it stops at 12 for every one of the 115 charges, I don't know.
Yeah, that's fair.
But then how do you add that up?
Well,
if it's all at once, then
we landed on 1 million for that.
$1 million points. Well, yeah, it's interesting because say if it was 115 and they were all 10, so what's that? It's 1,000 points, is it?
Yeah. 1,150 points. Yeah, I'll take that.
Yeah. Do they? Does that all just go off one season, or do they take down some of them that they haven't earned back into the next season, or what?
I would love to see the absolute tour that City go on with minus 1,100 points starting the season.
The City fans do very well as well. They don't ever get stuck into like conspiracy theories or anything like that.
No.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's the problem as well. Is I've been kind of looking around the fan news at all this kind of stuff, and I think when a lot of kind of fan news sites they try and be reasoned, but I think they always try and get a reaction for the sake of, or be big reactors for the sake of, for the sake of the likes and all that. So then, so then the ones that look into conspiracy theories tend to get a bit more heated and that kind of side of it. So you're trying to keep a level head whilst looking at that as well, the extremes on each side.
Oh, you're not going to like our next conspiracy segment then?
Oh no, I kind of buy into it to some degree though. There's because you could say what I've just said's a bit of a conspiracy in terms of the regulators,
Yeah, that's the thing,
But,
isn't it? With every conspiracy, there is some truth behind it somewhere. So that's what makes it interesting, I guess.
I was going to ask, can I mind? I wanted to ask you something, Steve. Obviously, regarding Everton, obviously we talk about it being harsh. This could only really be the start of things, couldn't it? Because there's rumours that the clubs that were so hard done to, such as Sean Dyche's Burnley, are rumoured to potentially look to do legal action against Everton now. Is that something that worries you in a takeover?
It's a bit of an odd one, that, because it's the year that's supposed to have happened is 2 years previous to that. So it rules out last season at least. So I think it would be the season Burnley went down, maybe. But at the same time, as much as from what I've seen, it looks like we haven't really got much of a football advantage out of it. It's the source of it going over the top is from a stadium. It's a stadium loan.
Yeah.
And the reason it went over was because the interest rates had gone massive. So, to do with all the COVID and everything like that. And we were pushing the line because, we'd overspent in previous years, obviously. And so obviously most of our payments are still going to be towards wages and, transfers and all that. So they're saying the majority of it's that, but that's always going to be the biggest chunk of it, of what we're spending. So, it seems a lot like, it's come from a stadium issue, and now they're trying to pile on that it's a football issue. Again, I sound more and more like a conspiracy theorist. But
it's fine.
It sounds like I'm trying to get myself on next week's show, doesn't it?
So
clips.
Is it just poor accounting, or is there extenuating circumstances that Everton feel that they've been unjustly done harshly by this? They've unjustly been done by these rules because of extenuating circumstances, or is it just poor accounting and they've almost thought they could get away with it with the covering it up with COVID, the blanket COVID sort of exemptions that were handed out?
Yeah, well, it feels like a bit of both, really. I think because one thing I've heard is that they could have done that stadium payment through a bank or got a bank to pay it.
Right.
We wouldn't be in this situation at all. So there's that. And you kind of think, well, they probably would have done something like that if they knew this would happen. So, and the interesting side of it is that they've been talking they say that they've talked with the Premier League through every step of all this and got them to okay everything. So it'd be interesting to see in the appeal if they've got any concrete evidence of them agreeing about that, But it's no secret that the club hasn't been well ran the last since we've had the money in, really, especially. But so you wouldn't put it past them to have overlooked something as well. So that's the kind of bit we're nervous with. But
speaking of, I've just got a question actually. Speaking of being nervous, so our sort of take on it is, sort of generally is that, okay, you've had 10 points deducted, but if there's ever a year to have those points, this is the year, because every other team in the bottom three is terrible, and you should be able to get yourself out of the situation anyway. So does that sentiment extend amongst the fan base? Are fans nervous now that they're going to be in a tougher position than, back in a relegation scrap when maybe they were showing signs of doing a bit of quality and getting out of it? Or is it the same? Because our take on it is, well, if your competition's Burnley, Luton and Sheffield, then take another 10 and you'll probably still be okay.
That's been kind of an initial thought when I saw the thing. I saw, we've been deducted and we're putting in an appeal. And I thought, is the appeal going to be detrimental to us if that pushes it on to next season? Have we got a stronger bottom three to be playing with this deduction against? But but they obviously see something in the appeal at least. At the same time, as well as we've played recently, that's been with pretty much our first strength 11. And you're talking about injuries last week. And Everton have been a bit of an anomaly with that this season. They've had 3 out this season. Been Seamus Coleman, who had that long-term one, Dele Alli, who's had his problems, and Andre Gomez, who we didn't really expect to have any part in this season. Apparently Onana's just got injured as well, but I don't think that's anything major. But I don't expect us to go through December and having the strength that we've had in the last few weeks, you know? So, yeah, and then, I don't know, maybe it's just because I'm supporting a club that's around there as well, is you kind of worry that one of these other teams will step up. You never know if they will get another manager comes in, gets a couple of experienced players on the cheap, and suddenly they can pick up points. You know, they can get to, you know, mid-30s points, and then that's a serious issue for us then, you know? So, yeah, so you can see why they're not taking it lying down. But,
and as well, Liam mentioned the sort of the claiming that's going against, I think, speared by Burnley, Leicester and Leeds, is this 300 million compensation that could, in theory, with all the stuff in the takeover going through, it could send Everton into administration, which would be an automatic 10-point deduction again. Is that is that something that is of concern at the moment? Or do you think that there's nothing's going to come of that?
Yeah, well, you kind of take these things one thing at a time, I guess. So you kind of push that to the back of your mind. And
we're going for the pylon approach.
Yeah. No, I get it. Well, for one thing, the administration's 9, isn't it? So they've given us 10, so that it's an unprecedented amount.
Right.
You know, to make the headline bigger. You know, so that kind of ties into the the independent panel, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
The only thing I've seen as a response to that really is in terms of the getting sued, is the timing of when it was. So who did it actually affect? Obviously, and then and then there's the stadium being part. You know, how much of it was actually sporting and how much of it was stadium when the appeal goes through. And then again, when it comes to that, it's the minefield then of how much could we then get back off City and Chelsea, if doing it that way.
Hopefully,
so,
from Everton's point of view, City and Chelsea get ridiculous deductions, and they're just the lowest of the minus clubs. The ones who've been deducted the least points this season.
Yeah, but still somehow, still have the money to pay everyone out. But I think it's a bit odd that they've signed it off with that thing saying, you know, we've kind of opened the door now to other clubs to take legal action. Seems a bit of an odd thing to do, you know, as part of it. But I say I haven't thought about that too much. It's it still feels a little bit hypothetical because where can they say how much was what and all this?
There is a precedent, though, isn't there, with West Ham and I think Sheffield United.
Yeah.
I think there was a precedent with that, wasn't there, with the Tevez and Mascherano signings. They did agree a compensation. I don't think it was anything like the numbers being talked about here. And there was no actual points deduction from West Ham. But if I remember rightly, there was some sort of out-of-court settlements there.
That was to do with third-party ownership, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
Let's move it on to something lighter, because we might as well fix something while we're all here. It seems that the Premier League have fixed it. They've fixed this one for us. But Steve, while you're here, we speak about Arsenal and Chelsea, and God knows we speak about Bolton enough. So let's speak about Everton for a minute. And Dice has finally seemingly got you playing a bit of football at the moment. As ugly on the eye as it might look, the points are starting to add up. And before this deduction, things are looking all right.
Yeah. Well, I think it's one of those things as well. It's not as, I wouldn't say it's as ugly as people are saying, because it was pretty ugly beforehand. You know,
That's
like
true.
some of our best games under Lampard with 3 at the back, backs to the wall, and we were just lucky enough to have Richarlison be able to hold it up well enough for us and Gordon. So then, you've got to be a bit smarter than that when you've got a not fully fit Dwight McNeil as that replacement, and all that. So it's he's obviously got his playing a bit better. It does remind you of the kind of Moyes years. It's deemed as defensive, but we're actually getting in the box a lot more and getting a lot more chances. And I've never heard Evertonians mention XG scores as much as they have earlier this season.
I was going to ask this thing. Go on. I was going to ask because obviously I've known you for years and I know what Everton fans are like, and I know they're always sort of conscious of their image. Everton fans. That's like the thing that they have. Do they like Dyche, or are they just concerned about how they're perceived? Because I know you've touched on that defensive thing there. I know that's a thing for Everton. Did the fans like him, or do they sort of tolerate it?
No, I think he was pretty welcome when he turned up. I think if we'd have got him when we got Lampard, I think we felt like we were under a bit of a blip with Benitez, and he kind of dropped us down.
That was mad.
We didn't really. Yeah, it was. But we didn't really feel like we were, that kind of level of team. Really, we felt like our players should have been better than that, or around a mid-table team at least. But once it got to January last year, it was pretty clear that we're a relegation team now, and you just got to do whatever you can to get out of it. But similarly, like with Allardyce, you have this kind of unfashionable side to it, but then they are quite forward-thinking managers, and they can be quite attacking, and you can get quite good you can get really good football out of it if you give them time. And
I was going to say, Steve, do you think I remember when Bolton in the Premier League and those last few years, and it felt like we were swirling in the plug hole for 3 or 4 years before we eventually went down the hole. Do you think Everton can get out of that swirl with the new stadium, or or do you think that eventually you will essentially flush down the drain?
You'd hope not, because we can't afford to, for one. If we'd have done it last year, there are a lot of people, kind of in the know saying that we'd be royally screwed if we went down. The parachute payments wouldn't be enough to keep the club afloat. So, but at the same time, I don't know. There's something there. It depends on the, new owners and how attractive they can make the club appear for, for more investment and more advertising, more revenue, and all that kind of stuff. I feel like, we're not going to get a better manager than Dyche to take us, up to, it's good. I'm not saying immediately, but, I think the plan is that a lot of Evertonians have kind of settled on, is that we want to be good enough to be eventually looking at these, Europa League, Conference League places in a few years' time. But we want steady progression to look like we are able to do that. I think it's possible, yeah. I don't think we've shown that we can be good. We just need a few more, a bit more time getting it together in a more balanced squad, which we haven't had for, 4 or 5 years. Ancelotti never had a balanced squad and started off well with that. We're top of the league after 10 games and stuff like that. So, I think we've got enough there. It's just recognizing that it's got to be steady.
Yeah. So while we're all here, Scott, I'll start with you. I think the obvious fix would be that Everton gets the ownership stuff sorted out. They get sold, and the refinancing can help. Obviously, even more initial than that is that Dyche does everything in his powers to keep them up this season.
No, I think it starts with the work on the pitch for me. I think you sort of said it right, that, first and foremost, regardless of what's going on in the background, Dyche now has, harder job on his hands than he had last week. So he's just got to try and keep the players focused. I suspect, my prediction, I think, is that the team will sort of rally around Oz now, more so than they were before, because they've now got something to fight against, and I think that can be quite powerful. So I think Deitch and the team just have to focus on getting some points back on the board. Like I said, one win, and when all the other bottom three do lose, because they will, they're out of the drop zone anyway, and they can start carrying on that momentum. So I think they'll be okay. I think they've just got to not let it, it's as much as they possibly can, not let it distract them, and just try and keep building on the good work he's been doing.
Liam, you agree?
Yeah, 100%. I think something we've not touched on today, and we won't do, maybe one for later down the line when we know what's going on, is the new owners. We'll talk about that like it's a guaranteed winner, but there are question marks about their track record.
Yeah,
we're worried about them.
Yeah, so we'll not go down that road today, but I think the biggest fix for Everton, and all they can do, is do their best to separate what's going off the pitch and on it, because they can affect it. The best thing for Everton is to stay in the Premier League, no matter what is down the line in terms of appeals or legal actions. The best thing they can do is stay in the Premier League. So the players just need to remember that, which is obviously easier said than done, but that's what they need to focus on.
Oh yeah. No, I was just going to say how many times we're going to hear the likes of Tim Sherwood say the word galvanise and backs against us against the world in the next the rest of the season.
That's exactly it. I'll let you wrap us up with what you think is the main focus for Everton. If you're given the reins of the club for a day, what do you start with? What's your first protocol?
Say on the pitch, nothing really changes much. Really, they're playing well enough to get 10 points better off than the rest of the league, than the other three teams down there, possibly Bournemouth. That's the problem with Everton, is knowing what the issues are further up. None of us really know, and I think people ask for transparency, but you can never really know what's going on there.
No.
So just on the football side, I think we're going in the right direction. I can't really say much of a fix for that. But yeah, in terms of the podcast with Everton, I joked with Liam about doing a fixing attitudes, fixing football podcast attitude to Everton the other week.
This is it.
And I think we can just. It's been fixed. Okay. Well, I was going to say we could throw in just like the mutual enemy in Luton.
Yeah.
that could be
also,
it.
Before you jump to that conclusion, you want to hear the rest of the podcast before you decide.
I was wondering why I had heard the rest.
There was some big slander going on in that first 20 minutes. No, Steve, really appreciate you jumping on, mate. Thank you very much for joining us. Scott, Liam, thank you as always, guys.
Thank you.
No worries.
Cheers, thank you.
No, I really appreciate it. Thank you, everyone who's been listening. It's been much appreciated. All the numbers are slowly going up, so please keep on liking and sharing and subscribing. Liam, where can they find us on Twitter?
At Fixing Football.
And Scott, just off the top of your head, if there was anywhere, like if you could pick your favourite website in the world to find like links for any of our social media, what would that be?
It would be fixingfootballpodcast.com.
How hard is that?
It's super easy. It's perfect. It's like should just roll off the tip of your tongue. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. We'll catch up with you all next week. Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
See you later. Thanks.
Bye, everyone.